Hello, Gubseekers. What is up? It is I, Graham Elwood, black collared shirt with a little blue trim match. What? Oh, oh, we're getting it twice. All right, there we go. Sorry, that was an echo. That was on me. Like, share, and subscribe, folks. We are streaming on my YouTube channel, on Lee Camp's YouTube channel. I want everyone on all the YouTube channels to see my Superman curl. It's getting frayed out a little bit. Let's kind of just work on that a little bit. Okay. Support our Patreon so I can buy hair plugs, guys. We need to really fill in some areas, and we want to do that as soon as possible. It is critical for this show to survive. So we're going to start up maybe a $10,000 hair plug tier, and we'll set that up at patreon.com/government secrets. So Blaze Saber Wolf is our moderator today. Is Holly here as well? I'm not sure, but thank you to everybody who is here and in the chat. And like, share, and subscribed. And everyone that is over watching on the Rockfin, good to see you over there as well. And of course, on all of our channels. You look fabulous. Stop fasting. Stop fussing. Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Noli. I appreciate it. I gotta go. Thanks, guys. Take care. All right, let's start the show. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for Government Secrets episode 144 with the two most censored comedians in America, Lee Camp and Graham Elwood.
Hey, man.
What is up?
Excellent plug for the hair plugs. I was hoping you'd get that in there. I'm also looking for hair plugs, but it's if you guys donate, I'm hoping to get nipple hair plugs because it's getting a little thin and really want to fill it in. So
Lee's Balding Nipples is the name of my memoir, and it's gonna be out in June.
I would be so flattered.
I think you should share your story, what it's like to have balding nipples. It's
not easy, man. People look at you. Now, it could be because I cut a circle out of my shirt around both nipples so people can see them at all times. That might be why, but I think it's the balding. I think people, they're judging me. They're judging me.
Your areola shirts that you sell online at leecamp.net.
Yep. Areola Jordan shirts.
Jordan. Oh, yes. That's great. Well, I have a fair amount of chest hair. I could loan you some if you want to like just do
yeah, if you want to have an exchange program, I'm down.
Yeah, I'll send you some chest hair and you send me some hair to fill in this area right here and we'll be good.
Okay.
We'll be good to go.
I mean, you might have to stop referring to it as Superman curl. It might become an evil villain, Widow's Peak or something.
It's very much coming that. I mean, literally in about 15 years, I'm just going to have a little thin strip right here. And then it's going to go like, these are going to be bald. It's going to be insane. And I don't know.
It's like a reverse balding.
It is. And I think if that happens, I think what I'll do is then I'll grow this side part out really long and then like whirl it up.
Wait, was that Mo or Curly who had that? One of them. One of them had that.
Yeah, I think that's what I'll do. And then we'll really get into solid supervillain territory.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're already kind of seeing it like there's more gray here. So if I just dye this like jet black and then let this get gray, then I can have a crazy.
Dye your villain hair for justice. Yes.
Yes. If there's one takeaway from today's show, folks, it's what to do with Lee's nipple hair and my villain hair.
If there's one takeaway from every show, that should be it.
That should be it. Well, I should make this announcement. I will be in El Salvador February and March, and Max Kaiser.
Oh my God, you're moving, aren't you?
I'm waiting
for that announcement. You know what it is? Every week you're gonna come on the show and go, "So my flight got canceled. I just can't get back to the United States."
Well, I mean, to be perfectly honest, I've just bought a one-way ticket, but I'm sure I'll fly back. I'm sure I'll be coming back at some point. Um, if my alma mater, the University of Arizona, makes it to the Final Four, I will
Mm,
come back for that in April, because
mhm.
that's in Phoenix, and Arizona is going to win it all, bear down.
Yep.
Um, but I will be guest hosting the Orange Pill podcast with that Max Kaiser and Stacey Herbert have been doing. They haven't been able to do it as much because they're very busy, working with the government, with the President Bukele. And so Max was like, "Hey, why don't you?" I said, "I'm going to be down there, and he goes, "Why don't you like start doing the show like 4 or 5 days a week or something?" And I think he said 3 to 4 days a week, and then we can, they'll come on when they have time, and then they don't have to like they just
Nice.
don't have the bandwidth to do that show, and they've got this beautiful studio that somebody made for them down there. So I'll be doing that, which means
What is the orange pill? Is that anti-diarrheal or,
yeah, it's it's a show that focuses on. I just had a colonoscopy, so I just figured we're just going to watch colonoscopy videos 4 days a week is what the
but
show's going to
the
be.
orange pill totally helps though. I've taken a couple.
Yes,
I
absolutely.
like to break them up and snort them so you don't have the time release. You get the whole hit at once.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Well, you just like snorting whatever. I mean,
Pencil shavings. Yep.
yeah.
Anything.
Pa- Paprika. I've seen you do it cooking. I mean, you just go nuts. You just
Yep. Sometimes I'll
snort.
do whole vegan chicken nuggets. Just snort them.
Just one big thump, and it goes
Yep.
to the back of your head.
Thump. You hear it hit the back of my cranium, right through the brain. Yep.
And then it just boom goes down into your stomach. It's You have a cartoon body where it's just like empty skull and then stomach with nothing else,
Yep.
which is great. Yeah, so orange pill actually, Lee, is a term when somebody first learns and like what Bitcoin is. Um,
Mm.
they're called, "Oh, I got orange pilled. I didn't know anything about Bitcoin." Then somebody, so it's a term
Okay.
within the Bitcoin world. So
So they took the red blue matrix pills
yes,
and they changed them to just Bitcoin.
yeah.
Gotcha.
So like if you say someone like if you're like do you own some Bitcoin? Do you own a little or
Oh yeah, we discussed this a couple weeks ago. I have somewhere I either have 14 Bitcoin or 14 Satoshi. I don't know uh what the difference is, but
kind of big? It's kind of a huge difference. It's
it's either 14 Bitcoin or 14 Doge. I don't remember. One of
yeah,
them.
it's
One of them.
so each Bitcoin can be cut up into 1,000,000 Satoshis. So if you have 14 Satoshis, you have, a piece of lint. Or if you have 14 full Bitcoin, you are close to a millionaire. So
So one of those.
like,
Whatever. Whatever.
somewhere,
Yeah.
it's no big deal either way. It's no big deal either way. Um, but what you would say
Also,
is,
I have it stored on cold storage that is in one of the toilets of the apartments I used to own. So I have to. But I'm gonna go look for that. So anytime now.
I would, if there were 14 full Bitcoin on it, I would be knocking on that door right now, is what I would be doing. Um, but yeah, so what you would say is whoever educated you, you'd say, "Oh, I was orange pilled by Max Kaiser or whatever."
Gotcha. Gotcha. I mean it sounds like a Me Too moment if you said you were orange pilled by someone, but
You're obviously going to be my first guest on that podcast. Just a guy that's just completely shitting on the whole thing. It's just going to be fantastic.
I don't know if I've been shitting on it. I'm just pleading ignorance on it.
You're right. You're not shitting on it. That's absolutely correct. You're not shitting on it. You're just like ignorantly making fun of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which
As
is
I do
what
most
Rob
as I do most things.
which is the beautiful thing about being a comedian is it's the thing that comes into every comedian's brain. Like, even if you're like, logically, like Ron Placone makes fun of me, even though he's like a huge crypto holder. Like he's like he's
Is he?
he's oh yeah. He like paid off his car with it. Like he's like, but then
Nice.
it's that thing as a comedian. You're like, logically, I get it, it's smart, I understand it, but I still have to make fun of it. Like I
How?
have
How could you not? But I also view the entire world that way.
well, sure, of course.
There's there's nothing in the realm of reality that I don't view that way.
Well, you've noticed that's why there's no comedians like leading activist movements, even though like we're down with them, we believe in them. If we were the leaders of those movements, at some point we'd be like, haha, this is kind of dumb. Or what, like we would.
Right, right. Like I last weekend I went to a, a bunch of activists got together to shut down an Amazon warehouse for their association with surveillance against Palestinians. And so I was there, but I was still making snide comments to the people standing next to me
Of
because I
course.
can't,
You can't.
I cannot. No.
You can't. I remember was asked to speak at a Julian Assange rally, and I was like, there was no like comics around me. Like my cousin was with me, and he's funny and stuff. But I was like, it's so hard for me to not be making fun of what's happening, even though I support it. Like ideologically, I just happened to be. I couldn't.
Yeah,
It was.
I was just standing there. I was like, I find it interesting. It's an Amazon fulfillment center, considering everyone working in there does not find fulfillment.
There's no fulfillment at
No
all. Like
fulfillment
there's
whatsoever. No.
um. Why don't we do some segments? What do you think about that?
Wait, what? What are you talking about? Oh, okay, I guess.
I mean, unless we want, maybe we just want to count the segments as hair plugs and Bitcoin. Those are our two segments today. The truth about hair plugs.
We have to retitle it hair plugs and Bitcoin. So mine's a little long, but I can, as we're going along, I can speed it up if it looks like it's going way over. So,
Is it fun?
I mean, slave owner is always fun. Slavery in general. No, I mean yours is funnier. Yours is definitely funnier.
So you go first.
To leave people with a positive note.
Yeah, we gotta leave. I try to leave them on the whatever the more jokey one is.
Yeah.
We'll do that. That's our story.
Yeah.
That's how we do it.
All right. So this is about how, because this is an interesting question to me. It's like, okay, so Civil War happens. Eventually, the slaves are freed, but most of the oligarchs and most of the ruling elite in America continue to be ruling elite. Even the slave owners. And so, how did that happen? What exactly went down after slavery ended to transfer the oligarchy from one generation to the next? And so Reuters did an extensive, and this is the thing, Reuters is largely a neo liberal propaganda outlet, but it's allowed to do really great coverage if you go back like 100 years. So it'll defend an apartheid state of Israel modern day, but if you go back 100 years,
just go back to the early 1910s, and Reuters is on point. I mean, they're just perfect.
Nailing it. 1910s. So
that should be their motto. We were great up until about 1920, and then
no. Technically, what I'm saying is they're great now about 1920. So that right now we are covering 1910 like you wouldn't believe, way outside of the Overton window.
Well, I think that's fair. I mean, most journalists have about a 100-year lag time of getting it right. You know what I mean?
New York Times, in all honesty, New York Times has like a vicious 10-year lag time. Like 10 years after we didn't find WMD, they were like, we did not find WMD.
Yeah.
And that is atrocious.
It'll be in the 2040s when New York Times is like, boy, Israel was really committing a genocide in Gaza.
I think that was, Israel. I think that was a genocide a decade ago. Yeah.
We're just uncovering this now at the New York Times in the year 2037. You're like, oh, really?
Literally, they'll be excavating sites in Gaza going, we're coming up with a conclusion this was a genocide. All right. So, about a month after the Civil War began, a slaveholding ancestor of current. So, they relate most of this article to current serving Congress people, three main Congress people that they follow their ancestors, and how that wealth has transferred all the way to now. So, these people still have wealth and power. There, three of them are in Congress. Um, I'm not going to focus on that factor. I'll mention it here and there, but my point is really just a more general of like, how did the oligarchy continue after losing their slaves, which had to be very upsetting to them when they were like, "Oh, we had this
Yeah.
great thing going."
And the fact that there's 3 people still in Congress, it just is like, yeah, just in case you were wondering, it's not a representative democracy. It's the
Right.
theater of representative democracy that was just written to, again, let the oligarchs and the landowners protect their wealth, and so this is how they do it.
Right. And these are three that like direct descendants of like you can follow them down. And I don't have a problem with being a direct descendant of a slave owner because I happen to be one, but it's more the hypocrisy of it. It's more that these people are still in power, still incredibly wealthy. My family is not. I don't know how. We blew all that slave money. I don't know what we did with it, but um, anyway,
Vegas.
yeah, it was all in Vegas. Anyway, about a month after the Civil War began, a slave owning ancestor of current U.S. Congressman French Hill seemed confident about the future. Quote, Lincoln, this is from a letter that plantation owner Creed Taylor wrote. He said, Lincoln can starve me out unless he takes my land, and cannot starve me out unless he takes my land and Negroes. By the time the war ended in 1865, Lincoln had freed the enslaved, including at least 70 who worked on Taylor's cotton fields beforehand. But Taylor's family found a path back to prosperity that didn't look much different from the way he had first made his fortune. Taylor still owned 1,500 acres of farmland, but by the turn of the 20th century, his grandson oversaw a sprawling cotton operation, and for years the fields would be worked once again by Black people who didn't have a choice. Emancipation dealt many slaveholders a staggering economic blow, wiping out vast amounts of wealth across the South. The reported wealth of Southerners dropped by $4.3 billion, or about 65%, erased about 2/3 of the wealth in the South. Clearing the clearest path to rebuilding, was often by replicating elements of the slavery economy and reinstituting feudal systems that embraced white supremacy. So this is such a key point, and you and I have mentioned it before, but most people think like, oh, the slaves were freed, and yeah, it wasn't easy for them, but it was they had every opportunity like any other American, and the things were equal again, and it's
Yeah,
like bullshit. It's like
complete bullshit.
they were in an impossible situation where they were their skill set was farming. They had zero money generally when they were freed. They
No
were largely
education.
largely illiterate. So
Yeah.
it's like, what do they do? Where do they go?
Right. Well, and then there's on top of that, I mean, this is Spike Lee's movie company is called 40 Acres and a Mule because they were promised they would get 40 acres and a mule to to the point of, okay, this is their skill set is farming. So we're going to give you your own land, which will help then you build intergenerational wealth. And they lied about that and made them sharecroppers. And as you're pointing out in this segment, kept them enslaved. So they didn't even, imagine what the economy would look like for Black people in America if they were actually given 40 acres and a mule. Like it would be like, oh, they able to turn that some of those families would still probably own some of that land, or whatever. And that did not happen.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been the least that the country could have done for people who had been enslaved for generations, and of course, not even counting the number of Black people who just died on the ships
Right.
headed here. So it really would have been the least. But so the Black people who had been enslaved emerged with far less. Racial violence and voting laws locked them out of political power, right? So they couldn't make any of the laws. All the laws are being made for white supremacy, even though you had the North occupying the South, kind of like, Reconstruction, kind of making sure that they didn't get too racist. But still, there were no Black people in power. So what kind of laws do you think a white supremacist, white oligarchy of wealthy white men are going to pass. Like the laws are going to be as slanted against black people as could humanly be possible.
Right.
Schooling was limited, leaving most unable to read and write. The federal government let former slaveholders keep their land, and the newly freed were offered few paths to prosper, leaving them once again at the mercy of the white elite. Reuters found that a fifth of the U.S. political elite, like current political elite, Congress members, living presidents, Supreme Court justices, and governors, are direct descendants of slaveholders in America, which is amazing considering direct descendants of slaveholders is, it's I don't know the percentage, but I'm sure it's far less than the shocking number of Congress people. A fifth of Congress people are direct descendants.
Wow. Yeah. Anyone can work in Congress. Nope.
Yeah.
No, you can't.
What remained for these wealthy people in the South after they lost their slave was the land, the land and key social and political connections that a 2021 study concludes proved critical to the financial recoveries of the largest slaveholding families. So they lose their slaves, but they still have all the land and all the political connections. Here's a quote from Stephen Hahn, professor of history at NYU. The power of enslavers came not simply from their ownership of property, but from their ability to wield political power and from their clans. And, he didn't spell clans with a K, but, So in the post-war Reconstruction era, it was a time when the Old South sought to reassert itself socially and politically, stripping away the rights black people had gained during Reconstruction before federal troops withdrew from the region in 1877. So yeah, federal troops leave 1877. The South proceeds to strip any advancement that black people had made in that time. From 1877 to the early 1900s is when you see a lot of these Confederate statues go up, basically as a reminder to black people in the South, we are still the Confederacy. You are still our property, even if not technically.
Yeah, and as someone just pointed out in the chat, that the Confederacy, even though they lost the war, were given pensions and they lost a lot of their wealth, but the Confederate soldiers were still taken care of way better than than the slaves were.
Dude, one of the Albert Pike, the statue in Washington D.C. that I was there watching them rip it down when they ripped it down. He was a Confederate, like a Confederate, and he was a Confederate general who I think I have this right, who was kicked out of the army for mutilating soldiers and dead soldiers and stuff. Or at least for, whatever, I don't know, prosecuted or whatever the term is in the army. And then he also was apparently roommates with or lived with the guy who founded the Klan. And so they think a lot of the ideas that went into the Klan came from him. And this is in Washington, D.C., which is supposed to be not the Southern, the Confederacy, not the home of the Confederacy. So Representative French Hill, current representative, Republican from Arkansas, his great-great-grandfather leased prisoners. This is how, so they have all this land, they have all this farmland, but they don't have their slaves anymore. So one of the things you and I have discussed a little bit on the show is the leasing program from prisons, where black prisoners are leased out to plantation owners and they don't make any money. They're prisoners. So, and we have it in our Constitution that slave labor is allowed as long as it is prisoners. So slavery was banished across the United States except for prisoners. So we still to this day have not technically made it fully illegal to have slavery. And so they're leased to these plantation owners, where they, in this case, they picked cotton and handle other farm work for pennies a day in Arkansas. So I guess they got paid a tiny amount. Unlike the people Hill's ancestors enslaved, the prisoners represented labor without substantial investment. And I only learned this point a couple of years ago. This is another key point, is that because these plantation owners didn't pay a lot to buy these prisoners, they're a tiny investment. They actually treated them worse. Like they would beat them to death sometimes because it's not an investment. I mean, as sick as that is, under slavery, they've invested a lot of money. They don't want to kill their property. Under the leasing program, they could kill these prisoners, and they call the prisoner and say, "Hey, he died. Send me another one." Like
Jesus.
that's how fucked it was.
It's so crazy too that they had phones back in the 1800s. I mean, that's even crazier.
Exactly this kind with it was the pinky and the thumb, and they would just call them up. Yeah. No, it was carrier pigeon, but weirdly they would hold the carrier pigeon to their ear and their mouth.
And they'd yell into the pigeon, and then
They'd yell at the pigeon and then throw it out the window. Exactly. and then hope that their words would be spit out by the pigeon when it arrived.
This is the definition of two comedians. You're talking about something horrific, and then I just couldn't get past the fact, like, well, they didn't have phones back, so what's
And yet you didn't even blink when I said that the plantation owner drove his Tesla up to the plantations
you're just
and used his taser to tase the slaves.
slave labor would put up his solar panels and his satellite dish, and then that's how they all had the 65-inch flat screen TVs, was their slave labor.
So then another one they follow in this Reuters article is Senator John Kennedy from, yes, his name's John Kennedy, from a Republican from Louisiana. By the way, they also follow a Democrat in case you were thinking there's any goddamn difference. Kennedy's ancestors expanded the family's Louisiana land holdings through marriage and inheritance, then used poor black farmers to work the land. The family used both sharecropping and tenant farming, which effectively kept some of their black neighbors in debt. And I'm going to get more to the sharecropping and stuff in a minute, because that is one of the, main ways that this elite, wealthy portion of America was able to keep working their land and keep raking in their money. Here's a quote from Heather McGhee, author of The Sum of Us, a book on this topic. At the moment of emancipation and the end of the Civil War, when there could have been a massive redistribution of wealth to the people whose forced labor had built this country. And this is another, if you really want to dig down deep, this is why America became a wealthy country at the start. Like, it is based on just genocide of the Native Americans and slave labor and like just exploitation to a crazy degree made America wealthy from the jump.
Yes, and then they've been holding on to that wealth for hundreds of years. Thank you. A long story short, that was actually the pro-slavery argument used, that being investment, slaves in the U.S. were treated better than the slaves in Africa. Yeah, that's such a great, and that sort of theory still carries on today. Like, look at capitalism; it's pulling people out of poverty. No, it's not. It's making it worse.
Well, they also would make the argument, which is not that far off, that, well, these people, there aren't that many jobs for them. I'm giving them a job by keeping them as a slave. Like,
yeah. We fed them, like.
And believe it or not, people make the same argument today for wage slavery, which is by no means as horrific as slavery, but wage slavery, where they go, if people didn't have to work at Applebee's and Banana Republic, what would they do all day? Like, we have to enslave them because they would be bored and they would do things.
Yeah, we can't have them running around wild and free. We have to have them, slinging pancakes at a Waffle House.
Meanwhile, how many millions in America are just idle rich? Like the rich who don't even have CEO jobs, which are bullshit to begin with, but it's like the kids of CEOs. It's like,
do nothing. Do nothing.
No one makes that argument for them. Like, well, they're just free. What are they?
Yeah, no one's like, look at all these shithead, really rich kids that are doing nothing
Yeah,
other than, getting a $10,000, tab at a nightclub in Manhattan, getting bottle
but,
service for their
but
dumb friends.
that's a job creator right there,
Oh,
Graham.
that is a job creator. You're
Job
right.
creator.
For
Yep,
people that clean yachts.
yep. At least it's a blowjob creator. Hey,
I don't get it.
oh,
I don't get it.
you talking about like blow dryers, like a haircut,
Yeah,
or what are you talking
yeah.
about?
Like those guys that blow the sidewalks after they mow your lawn, or I don't.
Yeah,
What's going on?
leaf blower.
Leaf blower?
Okay, so I thought of this the other day. In Toronto, the girls that hang out with the hockey players, are they not called leaf blowers?
Probably true. First point. Second point, great time to bring it up. Like really,
Also,
really.
also, I don't want to say just girls. It could be guys that hang out with the hockey team.
I'm not judging anybody's lifestyle choice. If
Nope.
there's someone on the leaves that wants to get blown by a dude, he should be allowed to do that.
But I love that Graham, when I said in Toronto, was clearly like, oh, for God's sake, what are we talking about now? And then I still got to laugh. It still got him at the end.
I was like, this is going to be a waste of time, but it's probably going to be funny. So I'm in.
I'm in. Welcome to my career. It's gonna be a waste of time, but it's probably funny.
We should get this episode is hair plugs, Bitcoin, and the Toronto Maple Leafs getting blown. Like that's
And leaf blowers. But if they're not making leaf blower t-shirts at the Maple Leaves events,
come on, someone has to be on top of that.
literally, slave holding had enabled families to buy land and invest in other industries. It allowed access to top schools for their children, giving their descendants entry into prominent occupations, and it helped them foster relationship with other leading families, building connections that reinforce their economic interests. By the way, anyone who doesn't know that, that's how all of America works. If you're rich, you pass on a whole rich world of education, entrance into the best schools, etc. And it's massive nepotism.
Yeah.
While the formerly enslaved were essentially turned loose without any assets and had to support themselves. And as we mentioned, it's like, okay, you're free, you have zero money, you're illiterate, around you is racist against you, good luck. Like, incredibly hard.
Yeah.
After emancipation, the plantation family retained its land, but who would work it? So now they're talking about this is the Representative Hill family called Gracie, the last name Gracie. Gracie began experimenting with a variety of solutions after taking over from his grandfather in the 1880s, including using poor black farmers and immigrant laborers from China. Okay, so this is when they get into the details of the convict leasing program. Convict leasing involved paying the state. Southern legislatures enacted racist laws that diminished the rights of black people and provided the pretext to jail them for petty transgressions. And this is something we've mentioned in previous shows, but I think it was one of the episodes on just our policing in America. But you've got racist laws. They can arrest you for anything. And you're also illiterate. So you can't, they could say, I have a paper here that says I can arrest you. Or you could show them your papers and they could say, this isn't legit. And there's nothing you do. You can't even read the shit. They could just arrest you for anything, and then they put you in prison, and then, of course, you're leased out to this horror show that is plantations. And then one author Blackman says, convict leasing was a method of truly resurrecting something that looked almost exactly like the slavery that existed before the Civil War. It was not typical for convicts to go back into the exact same kinds of plantation settings, but Arkansas was a place where that did happen, because they're talking about Representative Hill from Arkansas. At least a dozen prisoners, mostly black, lost their lives on the Gracie land from 1890 to 1905, according to newspaper and state reports. Um, and so they talk about one. They actually looked up the history of one of these prison laborers named Washington, and he had been arrested. Uh, he had been arrested with a fine and an offense. The fine was for $5 for, quote, disturbing the peace by using profane and insulting language to a colored woman. So they found him, if this is true, which they could just make up shit, but if it was true, they found him talking rudely to a woman, and he's now basically back into slavery.
Wow. And this is also on top of the whole 13th Amendment, right?
Yeah. This is, yeah. They were brutally beat, struck, whipped, kicked, maltreated. Yeah. All right, I'm gonna jump down to just a little bit, and then we'll wrap it up a little bit on sharecropping. So in sharecropping, landholders typically gave farmers the right to live on and farm their land in exchange for a portion of the crops that they produced. So on paper, this for the moment sounds better, right? You're not a slave anymore. You decide you want to work the land, and you owe me for the land, but you get a portion of the profits from what you produce. And for people who'd been slaves and knew a lot about farming because they were forced to do it, that sounds pretty good. That sounds a little more free than they've been before. However, the farmers often needed credit from their landlords simply to put a crop into the fields. They had to buy the seeds. They don't have any money, so they now already owe money to the plantation owners. Owners would front them everything from food and clothing to seeds and tools, typically provided at inflated prices and sold at stores on the plantations themselves. So, and the plantation stores could say, you owe me whatever for this thing.
Right.
And it could be some exorbitant, it could be 20 times what a plow or a rake costs. But what choice do they have? B, they're going to do it because that's their option. Like I don't know.
Yeah.
After harvest, whatever was borrowed was deducted from the sharecroppers' earnings. In bad years, many may have owed more than they earned. So you get done with the year. You work the entire field. You get done with the year, work backbreaking work all year long, and they say, up, you owe more than you earned. So you basically have done nothing except survive for a year.
So there's all of that. And then, Taj Marie just did a super chat. Thank you. Says, fact, policing originated from slave patrols.
Yep. We covered that originally back. If anyone wants to go back and listen to our policing episodes, yeah, we did at least one, maybe two on the origins of policing and stuff. But yeah, U.S. policing is not the norm around the world. But the idea of white guys with guns on every corner started with slave patrols walking around trying to find black men that had escaped.
Yeah, or that they could just lock up for whatever reason after slavery ended.
Yeah. After harvest, whatever was borrowed was deducted. Oh, I already did that. Until those debts were repaid, laws forbade sharecroppers from leaving. And here's another point: is you're illiterate. You don't, even if you are literate, you don't know what prices are. So if the plantation owner says to you, hey, let's say tomatoes are $1 or whatever, per pound. If he says, hey, it's too bad tomatoes are only 25 cents a pound. How are you going to know the truth? How are you going to even know what,
Right.
Like, you were disconnected from the economy and you're illiterate. He could lie to you, and I'm sure it must have been endless lying to keep you there forever. You can't leave. You're in debt.
God. That's unreal. I mean, it's just like, that's what the show does is it's like, we're already aware of, this country was founded on, genocide of the Native Americans and slavery, but then you're just like, but then you dig even deeper and it's like, oh, even after we ended slavery, after a civil war, still was awful, in some ways worse. And this continued the lack of, intergenerational wealth.
And just last thing, one Casey Turnipseed, history professor at Jackson State, said that often they'd get to the end of the year backbreaking labor, and they'd be told by the record keeper, the plantation record keeper, "Oh, you and your family almost made it out of debt."
God.
So it looks like you're just going to have to do it for another year, and I bet you'll be out of debt then. I mean, it really is slavery under a different name. It's like slavery where they're maybe not allowed to beat the sharecroppers as much. Like,
I mean, again, and like we always talk about how these horrific acts and policies from 100, 200 years ago are still in place, or versions of them. I mean, a credit card with a 26% interest rate, and minimum wage being whatever, $11 an hour or something like that. And rents going through the roof, and gas has come down a little, but it's just like
and
whatever.
wage theft in corporate America.
Wage theft, the price of food, inflation, all that stuff. And now it's just like, only now it's not called slavery or sharecropping. It's just called free market capitalism.
It's called freedom, is what it's called, Graham.
It's called freedom. Yeah, get a hot cup of freedom.
Get the term right. Yeah, so I'll wrap it up there. People can look up this Reuters article. It's a really long expose about kind of detailed, first person accounts called Heirs of Power. And yeah, if you want all the details, but it shows how the white ruling elite of the United States continued a basically slave owning white supremacist society for many years afterwards.
And in some cases, they're still enjoying this. They're in Congress. They're still like,
well, now it's exactly the same, except it's you're working at Olive Garden. Yeah. You're still in a garden of sorts, but
yep,
it's an Olive Garden.
It's an Olive Garden. It's a bottomless breadstick bowl of indentured servitude. So that's government secret segment number 1. Well, Lee, you found this one. This is I am excited about this one because, first of all, I've just been on a bomb kick. The first year or two of the show, it was all CIA operations, and I'll go back to those eventually because there's still more of those fun ones to do. But we've been talking about lost nukes, and
the question is, are people going to be furious with you for not covering a lost nuke or a CIA operation? Don't worry, folks. This is an FBI operation, so don't worry. It's not.
Yeah. We're not straying too far away. This is an FBI operation where basically they, and we'll get into the details, but the gist of it, the broad strokes, are they coerced and manufactured people to commit a bomb thing and then arrested them. Like, it's this.
Yeah.
This is only America knows how to do these things so well.
That's how they keep us safe. That's how they keep us safe from the plots they create.
Yes. We're protecting you against us, the government. The biggest threat to Americans is the American government.
Yep.
An FBI informant seduced Eric McDavid into a bomb plot. Then the government lied about it. This is actually from 2015. The Intercept in 2015. Oh, remember the days before it became kind of neoliberal?
The days when it hadn't been fully captured. Yeah.
Oh, God. Now just like every 16th article, something sneaks through and you go, oh, that's the Intercept I know and remember.
Right.
So it was in 2004, Aaron McDavid, then 26 years old, was in Des Moines, Iowa for an annual gathering of self-described anarchists. McDavid had come from his home outside of Sacramento, train hopping the 17-mile journey and scavenging for food where he could, including in dumpsters. McDavid
By
had
the way,
been
amazing food is thrown out in this country, folks. I just want you to know. I myself don't do dumpster diving, but I do not look down on those who are behind the Trader Joe's, okay?
My hat's off to you. Anyone that's willing to do that, thank you. And
I was I was at I was so there's like a couch surfing app or something. This is like 8 years ago. Couch surfing app, and the guy was opening with got us like a couch surfing thing at someone's house when we were I was playing a club. And but the couch surfing app, one of the things you do is they give you a couch for free, but you have dinner with them. It's like a community thing. So we're eating dinner and we're like, 15 minutes in, and they go, the stuff you can find in the dumpster at Trader Joe's is just crazy. And the whole meal, and like, we got all this stuff there. And I was like, what? I think you warned someone beforehand.
yeah, you gotta kind of lead with that. That's a little that's not a lead you get to bury. You gotta
No, you don't wait till they're halfway through the meal. It's like, oh, I meant to tell you I'm allergic to dumpster food.
yeah. Oh, I'm gonna vomit for a week. Thank you. Um, man, I would be I would be so
Actually,
mad.
yeah, actually, it would have wrecked you. You would have been wrecked.
This is why, like, I'm at the point now where I almost never do Airbnbs anymore because I'm just like,
You don't know what you're walking into.
I don't know what I'm walking into. A hotel, I know what I'm walking into. I know what I'm
Yeah.
walking into. Some Airbnb and then, like whatever. Somebody's looking at me through a peephole or what, I mean, it gets creepy. Um,
There's a lot of good nanny cam footage of Graham. So some of it's actually doing really well on Instagram. So.
no, it's boosted by numbers. I can't complain, but I'm just like overall. Anyway, back to our friend McDavid. He'd been drawn into activism following the 9/11 terrorist attacks. When his parents gave him a copy of Michael Moore's book, Dude, Where's My Country? This guy started to attend protests in the San Francisco area, and he started gravitating toward anti-government views. He was staying in Iowa with other activists in a farmhouse with a large porch. They were attending Crime Think, which was described in gathering literature as an event for anarchists in pursuit of a freer and more joyous world. Oh, wow. So the FBI probably set that up. And McDavid, in an interview with The Intercept, jumped in a car with another activist, and a few minutes later, McDavid spotted her, short and petite, no more than 120 pounds, with pink hair and a camouflage miniskirt. She said her name was Anna. He was quiet on the ride back, impressed and slightly intimidated by the story she told of hitchhiking from Florida with truckers. McDavid recalled that Anna sidled up to him on the porch. So when are we going to bed? She asked. And he's like, all right, sweet.
See, red flag number 1 is camo skirt. Red flag number 2 is when are we going to bed? No,
Yeah.
on the first day. You just met her. You're like,
Yeah.
this is not sounding right.
And this is the thing. This is how the FBI has been infiltrating activist circles since the 60s. I mean,
I know, forever. It's like, do you understand? Like we know from the church hearings and
Yeah.
internal documents, the CIA was was balls deep in every union, communist organization, activist organization, and to think it stopped, like, why do people think it stopped?
Oh, it's gotten more sophisticated. And this is an example because everyone, like, what's your image of like an infiltrator? Like some guy with a crew cut and an earpiece just wearing a activist shirt, and you're like, oh, this guy's obvious. No, they got a cute young girl. She dyes her hair pink.
They have long hair. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so you look at a girl like that at an activist rally and you don't think, oh, she works for the FBI. You wouldn't think that. You would not think that. You would see me and think, I work for the FBI. Right?
It's true. It's true. No, I will say they do have both, because I was at Occupy LA. I remember this is in 2012, and we're doing, a march somewhere. And there was a guy who was quote unquote with us, who's on a bicycle, and he's like filming everything, but he's one of the protesters. And he's like ripped in like a tap out t-shirt. And you're like, I don't think you're one of us. I don't.
Well, that wasn't the FBI. That was LAPD. They just
That's what I
sent
mean.
some
Yeah,
new.
no, that was LAPD. Yeah,
That's as sophisticated as LAPD gets.
yeah.
And they give him instructions like, if anyone looks at you weird, fucking punch him in the face. Just fucking drop them. That's what they told that big ripped dude in the tap out shirt.
If
Um,
anybody, the truth is, most of the infiltrators I've met, if they look too much like an activist, like if they have they look like a drawing of an activist in like a political cartoon. Like if they have a Che Guevara t-shirt on.
yes. Yeah. It's but they've gotten more sophisticated and they make the people more, and it's usually, this is the thing I tell people about activist movements. I said, it's probably the person yelling the loudest oftentimes. It's the person, not always, but
Right.
the big, and when they come, the organization is already set up, and then this person comes in and they quickly move themselves up the ladder. They're very like, they're just like, and they're the most go-getter. And then you'll start to notice there's some conflict with that person. That's their job, is to get in there and divide and get everyone fighting.
Create conflict. They're often nowadays, definitely one of the tactics that's used very often is to use some aspect of woke culture to sideline everything. Like
Yeah.
like it's an activist group with no indigenous people in it, and they'll be like, I don't think we can have another meeting until an indigenous person leads the meeting. And you'll be like, there's no indigenous people here. And they're like, so we need to just stop until we find an indigenous person.
Yeah. Or they'll start accusing people of not being, down enough. You're not part of the true, part of the cause. You're not in the movement the way I am. And it's like, they start that kind of crap.
Yeah.
They're very sophisticated at that. So they go, she goes, when can I come sleep with you? So he goes upstairs, unfurls his sleep stack. And then she's like, no, I don't want to. And he's like, oh, okay, which confused her. And while she'd been flirting with the rest of the people at the gathering, she told him that she was 24 years old and had spent time in the Iraq in the National Guard, which turned her against the government. None of it was true. Anna wasn't an activist. That wasn't even her real name, which at the time was Zoe Elizabeth Voss. She was a paid FBI informant. She would go on to lead McDavid and two other activists in their 20s in a loose plot to bomb targets in Northern California, maybe in the name of the Earth Liberation Front, or maybe not. Fitting for the muddled plot, their motivation was as unclear as their targets. Anna, at the direction of the FBI, made the entire plot possible, providing the transportation, money, and cabin in the woods that the FBI had wired up with hidden cameras. Anna even provided the recipe for homemade explosives drawn up by FBI bomb experts. Members of the group suggested in conversation.
They provided everything. They provided the plan, the materials, the transportation, the leadership.
How to make it. None of these guys knew how to make a bomb until she shows up. And then I was just about to read, they said a lot of these guys viewed her as the leader. So,
God.
Wow. That's like saying, I found a group of guys and, they're all kind of pissed off at the government. So I give them guns and cocaine and a hideout and burner phones. And then guess what? I arrested a drug ring.
And then you arrest them. Yeah.
It's unbelievable. Well, actually not. I mean, this is what the FBI does. I mean, there's evidence. This is what they did and I'm not like with January 6th. I know there's people capable in this country of taking up arms and going to the Capitol and stuff. But again, the head of the Proud Boys and the head of the Oath Keepers were FBI informants. So how much did they stir up? How much did the FBI try to start a coup on January 6th? I don't know. But it's like you look at evidence from this story and you know the fact that those two guys were FBI informants on January 6th, and you go, I mean, it wouldn't
Right.
take much to get that
And
crowd stirred up, but
right. And we're not saying that there can't be FBI informants who are not like pushing the plot forward. There could be FBI informants who are like silent and sitting in the corner
right.
just informing. But there's a lot of evidence, and there was studies back 10 years ago showing that 90 some percent, and I think it was more like 97%, like of terror plots that the FBI had stopped, had thwarted, had arrested, were created by the FBI. Like a large, almost entirely percentage of these plots agreed by the FBI. And you might wonder, like, why are they doing this? And it serves a lot of purposes. I mean, with the example you're talking about, it's quote unquote eco terrorists, which I would argue harming a Humvee is not terrorism. Okay, uh, you've got to kill some people for it to be terrorism. But besides that, like the whole concept of eco terrorism, the number of plots that were actually genuinely created without FBI help and everything was tiny that you
Right.
actually
Right.
perpetrated. Tiny number. And so in order for this whole talking point of eco-terrorism, and in order to take away people's rights and surveil more people, and help the oil companies and the car companies and everything else, they had to create this as a thing. So that was part of it. But really it's to justify their job. I mean, the FBI after 9/11, they had to stop terror plots to justify the money and to make everyone in America think they're doing their jobs. So they created terror plots. Like,
They create this, literally, this woman organized a bomb plot. These are just a bunch of young kids that were probably just going to go protest or something, or chain themselves outside of a building. And she's like, no, 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 let's go make some bombs. And then I'm going to get you guys all arrested. So at trial, McDavid's lawyer, Mark Reichel, argued that the FBI had used Anna to lure McDavid into a terrorism conspiracy through the promise of sexual relationship once the mission was complete. That's inducement, Reichel told the federal jury.
You
That's
dude,
trap.
you bomb something, I'm so gonna blow you. Just bomb some things.
Yeah. Yeah. What did she say? I don't want to get tangled up sexually until after the movement or something, like something like that. Like in 2007, McDavid was convicted of conspiring to use fire or explosives to damage corporate and government property, and he was sentenced to nearly 20 years in prison. One of the
20
longest sentences.
years. Here's the thing, even if there were no FBI involvement, 20 years for planning and never doing it, planning to harm a building.
Yes.
20 years.
So if you're wondering why some of our activist movements have been hijacked, maybe this number might wake you up. At the time of his conviction, the FBI had built a network of more than 15,000 informants like Anna, and the government had classified eco-terrorism as the number one domestic terrorism threat. So 15,000 of these people, that's back in 2007. So I got to wager that there's probably double that operating now. And all of this, the stuff I've just been involved with since I became more like active 2017,
Since you've been
2018.
orange pilling people on the streets.
Yeah, man. Buy Bitcoin. I've seen some very peculiar stuff happen with groups of people, with activist movements, I've seen very peculiar stuff happen.
Yeah.
And like this organization, very small, Action for Assange, and they were all, activists for Assange. And then this guy came in and he started dating the top woman and one of the creators, and then he was causing fights with everybody, but she didn't want to break up. It was just like, this guy, come on. And that's not an outlandish theory on my part when you read this story, right? That's not crazy that a guy comes in and he just caused fights on Twitter and just everyone was fighting with each other. And you're just like, wow.
Yep.
So the 7 years after his conviction.
Well, real quick, American lady commented and reminded me, and we did cover this on the Malcolm X episode, that not just a police informant, he was an undercover police officer.
Yes.
Malcolm X's closest bodyguard, who's actually the guy who gave him mouth to mouth after he was shot, was a police official.
Yes. Yes. So 7 years after his conviction, the deceit was revealed last November. Federal prosecutors admitted, again, this is last November of 2014. This article came out in 2015. Federal prosecutors admitted that they had potentially violated rules of evidence
Yeah, thanks.
by withholding approximately 2,500 pages of documents. It's just a little,
just a couple.
just a couple.
You know what, Graham? It was in the bottom drawer. It was actually it was under their big cases of tax they had there, and they didn't notice the papers.
Well, that's why it took me so long to tack this up, is I had at least 5,000 documents, and it was, I couldn't, that they gave me FBI. I mean, I've been an FBI informant.
FBI gave it, yeah.
So I mean, it was like, and then I had like surfboard wax on it. So I couldn't, you know what I mean? Like it was all kind of confusing. And then,
surfboard wax.
oh, Alex Dasleeby showed up late, y'all. My brain exploded when I learned reparations were paid to slave owners, shaving all the knuckles for justice. Thank you, Alex Dasleeby.
By the way, do not shave someone's knuckles without consent.
Without do it always with consent.
Kids.
Always with consent. All right. So the among the 2,500 documents that the FBI just happened to misplace for 7 years were love letters between Anna McDavid, and evidence that Anna's handler, Special Agent Ricardo Torres, had quashed the FBI request to put Anna through a polygraph test commonly used by the FBI to ensure informants aren't lying to agents as they collect evidence. The new documents also revealed which of the letters and emails the FBI behavioral analysis unit had reviewed before offering instructions on how to manipulate McDavid and guide him toward a terrorist conspiracy. So they have a whole department of people that go, oh, this is some young dude that doesn't get laid a lot, so just trick him with your hot body, and then we'll get in and teach him how to blow up a van, and then we'll get him arrested.
Yep.
Yet when his lawyers demanded to know why the government had withheld evidence that had been specifically requested before trial, the government made a veiled threat to throw McDavid back into prison for violating the terms of his plea agreement, right? So he pleaded guilty to a lesser charge to get an immediate release. The United States is currently reviewing.
If you want information on the bullshit we're spitting, we'll put you back in jail.
Yes. So if you want us to admit to the fact that we lied and coerced you into committing a crime, which is completely our fault, and you never should have served a day of prison, we're going to make you stay in prison longer. So like, what a bunch of thugs. Like,
yeah, it's mafia shit.
Oh. Hey, Graham, why are you moving to El Salvador? No, I don't know. I feel so safe in America. The extent to which the crime was manufactured by the government can be carefully measured now, thanks to the release of hidden documents that became public earlier this year, again, 2015, and hours of undercover recordings that were obtained exclusively by The Intercept and Field of Vision, which are releasing a documentary about the case, Eric and Anna, directed by one of the authors of the story, Katie Galloway, along with this. So this is back. To me, there are big American themes here, said Ben Rosenfeld, a lawyer who was among those representing McDavid after his conviction. Man entrapped by FBI and their informant and railroaded by prosecutors who withhold and distort evidence at trial, is released after serving 9 years of an outrageous 20-year sentence. He then dares to ask for an explanation, and the U.S. Attorney's Office threatens him with re-prosecution just for asking. The court then runs cover for them all and refuses even to probe who was responsible. That's the opposite of accountability.
Wow.
So it's really it and then the article goes into why Anna, how she was a sophomore and she was, I don't know, she was in high school. She was 17 years old and started to get involved with the FBI, but just unreal. Let me see if there's anything. In October 2005, a collection of McDavid's electronic and handwritten messages were provided to the FBI Behavioral Analysis Unit. The unit's analysis and the fact that Anna received such specific guidance, key pieces of evidence that the defense had been seeking before the trial, were made public only in January of this year, which is 2015. At trial, Anna testified that Behavioral Analysis Unit had offered advice, but it was not disclosed that the FBI psychologist had actually reviewed McDavid's messages. God, I mean, so that's our federal government, man. That was all done with our tax dollars, you know? So if you even just say, I'm not a fan of the government, they're going to send a spy to manipulate you emotionally and maybe even sexually, and then give you all of the instruments to commit a crime and then charge you for that, and then withhold evidence when they prosecute you. That is the kind of shit that people go, oh, that only happens in North Korea or China or Russia. Really? Really?
Yeah. Huh. Yeah. There's another story. I can't remember the year or the city. I feel like it was probably Oregon, but where the FBI talked this guy, a really troubled guy, into planning a bombing. And they hooked him up with explosives that he didn't know were fake. And then, but the day of he's going to do this bombing, it turns out he doesn't have a car, or lost his car or something. So the FBI comes and gives him a ride to the bombing and then arrests him there.
How did you get to the bombing? Well, you gave me a ride. Guilty, Your Honor. Wait, what? Like they're doing everything just shy of like taping a grenade to a guy's hand with a string and then pulling it. Like,
yeah.
Wow.
I mean, it is horrific. They want to pretend there are these grand terror plots in America that don't exist, and then they stop them.
Yeah. Yeah. So
and then your mainstream media jumps in and says, FBI foils horrible terror plot. Everyone be afraid and love your federal government because they're looking after you.
Yeah. Oh, because the media will carry water for this whole, I'm sure if we went back and looked at CNN or whoever was covering this story, they were like, this young disgruntled man was going to blow up everything. And luckily this beautiful young pink haired FBI agent saved us all, or whatever. It's like, oh God. So that's my segment, Lee Camp.
And I'm sticking to it.
Boom, shakalaka. Folks, we will be over at patreon.com/government secrets doing some bonus segments and bonus content. Please come over there. It's a great way to support our show.
And the moment you join up over there at patreon.com/government secrets, you unlock 40 some extra 15-minute episodes.
Yes, they're fun. They're minimum 50, usually 15 to 20. Last week we went a little long. We went on another riff session.
Riffs happen.
Riffs absolutely happen.
Listen, folks, sometimes riffs happen.
And I'm sure in February we will be changing the time of the show. So that'll be something to be excited about, because we haven't had one of those in a while.
You're in February because you're headed to El Salvador?
Yes, because it's Central Time there. So it'll be 7 o'clock there. I don't, we'll have to talk off camera to figure that out. But
okay.
But yeah, go to GrahamElwood.com. We shot the Anything Can Happen game show. We're editing that right now. That'll be done in January. And I'm also going to be in Nevada doing some stuff for open primaries, which will be cool. So if you're in Nevada, we'll be interviewing some people on the street, independent voters in Nevada. So if you're an independent voter in Nevada, I will be releasing like times you can come get interviews and stuff like that.
And I have a very exciting announcement. The second episode of my new series with Breakthrough News just came out like an hour ago, and you can watch it on Breakthrough News' YouTube, but it will be up soon at leecamp.com as well. It's like 9 minutes long and new comedy news show.
Sweet.
Yeah.
And as I said, I will be hosting the Orange Pill podcast, guest hosting with Max. It's Max Kaiser and Stacey Herbert's Max and Stacey show. I'll be guest hosting it starting in February in El Salvador. So we'll be talking more about that. But this has been Government Secrets, episode 144. Slave owners rigged the game, and the FBI creates terrorists. Episode 144.
Oh, you know what, folks? Real quick, just occurred to me I can actually give you the link in the chat. Sorry. To my new episode. So I'm gonna put that in the chat in 1 second. That was me.
Sweet.
Okay.
I'll put the Intercept article in there too if you want to read it.
Yeah. Okay, so the one that says YouTube is the is my new breakthrough news episode if you're not joining us on Patreon.
Right on. All right, we'll see you over Patreon in a couple minutes. Thanks, everybody.
Later.